Deano's garage for the XJR 1200. Now, as you may know, the XJR 1200 is a very capable machine, but one of the downsides of this particular bike pre the 1300 was that it had a sort of standard Sumamoto brake system on the front. These calipers are okay, but I have found on this particular bike, you know, it's a big heavyweight air-cooled machine, that those front calipers just simply don't give me the confidence that I need on the road. There's not enough bite in the brakes. I have bled those brakes, I've changed the hoses, I've tried to ride and bed those new pads in on those front calipers, but yeah, still not good enough for me. So what I have decided to do was to go out and buy some second-hand Yamaha Blue Spots. Now I know these are very good front brakes. Obviously you've had them on the FS1 Phaser 1000. You find these on the R1, and really they've carried on ever since because they are such a good caliper. So I'm going to change these today from the standard Sumamotos over to the Blue Spots. But what I don't know yet is whether they will fit. So let's have a look together. They feel. Yeah, so the plan is to change over to those Blue Spots, but first we need to find out whether or not they're going to fit. So I'm going to get on, undo these bolts here, undo this bolt here, and then we can retain this caliper out of the way, and then we'll measure up the Blue Spot and see whether they fit onto these fixings on here, the sort of fixing lugs, bolt holes on the bottom of this leg, and we'll go from there really and see whether they're going to marry up okay. Let's have a look. Right, so having removed these two 12mm bolts and then this 8mm bolt, the caliper is retained using a zip tie onto the oil cooler cover here. That's just so you're not putting any tension on the actual brake line itself. It's gone through the bolt hole there, and then, like I say, held in place with that zip tie. So that caliper's up out the way. Now this is our Blue Spot caliper. Now I did take the time to clean these up using some brake cleaner. You can use electrical contact cleaner, it's a very similar type product. Obviously you want to only clean the outside of this, and I've used a little bit of wild water, get the rest of the grime off that plate. But be very careful not to get any sort of solvent type cleaner in, down and around the pistons, because it will get in between the piston and the sill and possibly cause damage to the rubber seal in there. So I was very careful not to get any in this particular part. So yeah, there you go. I mean, these calipers I managed to get very cheap. They've already got a very nice pad in them, plenty of meat on them, and they're a sintered pad, so you know they're a decent quality pad which came with them, so that's a bargain there. And they're in pretty good nick, you know, they've come up really nice and clean, as you can see, and you know they look a nice caliper. You know, those Blue Spots with those anodized bits there look a good caliper, and they are a good buy. So let's have a look how these marry up on here now. So basically find a spot where you can just drop the caliper in between the pads on the disc and then slide it up, and as we can see now, if I take the two bolts, then just find the bolt hole. Now a lot of Yamahas have the bolt holes on the fork legs at the right distance apart to suit these early Blue Spots. So the Phaser 1000, FZS 1000, it has very similar forks to this. They're not upside downs or anything, so I was fairly confident that that was going to fit. But what I wasn't sure is how the caliper was going to sit on this disc, because obviously I believe this is a 298mm disc, so you're never quite sure whether this caliper is going to sit on this disc differently, because if it was a smaller disc or a slightly bigger disc and it's bolted into the fork leg here, obviously the disc being bigger would then foul on the sort of back side, the inner part of here. I had that problem with the YZF where I changed over to the R1 calipers and upside down forks, but the discs didn't work out. I had to change discs to suit, because they actually fouled on the metal part of the caliper. But this, as I can see, is absolutely fine, and there's no whacking of metal against metal there. Looking at the pads, they sit exactly fine where they should do. Obviously you can see the part of the disc where you've got the wear part, and then obviously the part with the floating bobbins, and like I say, those pads sit in the right place on that disc. So all of that element looks absolutely good. That looks fine. So now what we have to do is hope that the master cylinder, the bit where the fluid pumps through the lines into the caliper, I hope the master cylinder suits these blue spots. Now I have looked at an XJR 1300 and they look like they have a very similar master cylinder to what I have here. It isn't a plastic type with a simple tube. It is the sort of metallic rectangular type, very similar to the clutch side as well. So I'm hoping that it has the exact same master cylinder on the XJR 1300, which has the blue spots. So I'm hoping that my master cylinder will suit these calipers, and really the only way I can really find that out, other than googling and trying to get that information from someone else who's done what I'm about to do, is really just to hook this brake line up to this side, obviously do the other caliper the other side and hook that one up, tighten everything up, and then go back to bleeding and getting the air out, and then seeing what happens down here in the sort of business end of things. Right, let's crack on. So here we are with the blue spots now in place and fitted. These two bolts, as I say, are the original bolts off of these forks, and they marry up and go straight on. No problem whatsoever, nice and easy, very straightforward. The only problem you really got to sort of watch out for is when you're bleeding the brakes up in the master cylinder, this part here. Obviously it pays to turn the handlebars to get this more, obviously this is at the moment on its side stand, by the way, and when I did this it was on the center stand, but still you need to turn the handlebars to get this more level, so when you're putting fluid in there's no chance of it spilling over. But I also put a rag around the outside, but when I bled these brakes, what I did is I bled the brakes of any air, then I took the caliper back off the disc whilst leaving the brake line here connected. So basically I could pump the fluid, look at the pistons, making sure that all the pistons were moving at the same time. If there was anything that was sort of sticking, you know, sometimes you can have 2 or 3 pistons move freely and 1 or 2 stick. That wasn't the case here, but I just wanted to see that and make sure, and ease them pistons back very slowly. But as you do, you're basically pushing the level back up in that master cylinder, and be prepared for some fluid to sort of shoot out. I had that problem, some went down the front of my screen, I didn't realise it first, and then I cleaned that off after with hot water, and then I've just cleaned the whole bike down with hot soapy water just to make sure that no sort of brake fluid residue is left anywhere eating into paintwork or plastics or anything like that, because it is and can be, you know, quite corrosive. So yeah, absolutely brilliant. I'm very pleased. Got to take the bike out and test ride it to make sure the brakes feel as good as they feel, at least here, when riding. But I'm pretty confident that those brakes are going to be as good as they are on my YZF 750, and they are very impressive on that YZF 750. So yeah, fingers crossed. But there we go, that's the XJR 1200 with the Yamaha Blue Spot calipers now fitted to this, as they would be on the 1300 later bike. So yeah, this is now pretty much there as per the 1300. In fact, this is probably better now than the 1300 because it's got the blue spots up front, and I have got those YSS rear pair of shocks on the back, which are much better than those sort of Olin shocks that are on these bikes as original. So yeah, very happy, and thanks for watching Deano's Garage.